May Jesus be praised and onward with Mary. A good and holy day to all of you, dear children, in the sacred hearts of Jesus and Mary, and in the most chaste heart of Saint Joseph. Welcome back to our morning program, Saints and Coffee. Today is Monday, the 28th of February. I am not joking. It is not a mistake. I said it on purpose, because here the weather is really humid. The humidity is so thick, you could cut it with a knife. And the temperatures, let's say during the day. But we're kind of used to that, though perhaps now more than in the past. I mean, basically, in the same day, you go from 10 degrees more to 10 degrees less. And then let's not even talk about the night. Anyway, the 28th of April marks the start of the last week of this Easter month of April. And today is the feast of St. Louis, Maria Grigno da Monforte, very dear to all of us, the Saint of Mary, the Madman of Mary as well. Then there was St. Maximilian Maria Kolbe, the Madman of the Immaculate. But we could say, as I myself used to say in the past, the champion of Mary the Prophet. In short, he deserves these epithets. Montfort and St. Louis Marie, because he wrote that treatise on true devotion, which is somewhat the Magna Carta of the final clash between the apostles of Mary and the followers of the saint. I think that all of you from the Little Respa have read the treatise on true devotion, and we are all consecrated to the Macron, because I wear the chain of slavery of love that St. Louis Marie Grignon de Montfort recommended. Adveniat regnum tuum, Domine, adveniat per Maria. You know I wanted it in the rosary. I hope it stays. Forever this invocation, which is truly Montfort's, he coined it. And there in Saint-Laurent-sur-Sèvre, where I have been several times, where the tomb of the saint who died in Lomé is, here it may be live again. Let's hope what I think doesn't happen, in any case. So we were saying that Montfort understood clearly, St. Louis Marie, that just as the kingdom of Christ came to earth for the first time through Mary, because Mary's yes, the Hail Mary, and her yes allow God to become flesh, he said with a very profound theological reflection, that then even the second coming of Christ in the final parousia is anticipated by Mary. It is Mary who will prepare humanity and the Church, especially the Church, to the final clash with the Antichrist, and to the triumph of her Immaculate Heart will correspond the very triumph of the kingdom of heaven. It is an extraordinary insight. So much so that I remember when I was studying at the Gregorian, I have two memories. Regarding Montfort in Rome, because then I was also in the Montfortian Venerarium in France. I owe a lot to St. Louis, Mary, as you can imagine. I have two memories in Rome, the first positive, but unpleasant, and at the same time the second one was completely unpleasant. The first, when I was studying at the Gregorian, I had as a professor. I attended a couple of lectures, some courses with Professor Stefano de Fioris. Perhaps his name means nothing to many, but he was a Mariologist who had a bit of a rivalry with René Laurentin. He wanted me to write my doctoral thesis on Fabio's third secret. At that time, I still didn't have all the troubles I have now, but I refused. I said, "I'm sorry, Professor, I don't feel up to doing this." He recounted, I was present in the academic hall, that John Paul II wanted to make St. Louis Marie Grignon de Montfort a doctor of the Church, but then, evidently, the matter faded away. The other extremely unpleasant memory is when I went to the Montfort Center in Rome, where the general house is, to ask for a relic. I had requested it through the procurator, and it had been granted to me, so I only had to go and collect it. I think it was near Montemario, if I remember correctly. I don't know, it should be to the north of Rome, but I could be wrong. I went, and you can't imagine. You can imagine how my superior treated me. He who was a Montfortian spoke of his founder as a deluded figure in history. But she comes here in the year 2020, I remember what year it was, to ask for a relic. But why does she ask for this relic? Because I have read the treatise. Yes, but the treatise is a child of its time. Montfort. Then they complain that they have no vocations and are shutting up shop. So, let's see if there's time. I would like to read at the end the fervent prayer he wrote. He has so many merits. This saint, who died quite young at 42 years old, has so many merits, however, so many merits. He is, in my opinion, Mary's saint, who started a generation, in which generation the gigantic figure is counted, but apparently forced to carry out an activity destined to be eroded by John Paul II. I lost sleep over the idea that Corriere Civici should immediately say Saint Pope Francis, like my John Paul. He brings a time bomb in favor of the traditionalists and all those who did not accept. John Paul II, Dziwisz, his secretary for 36 years. Unfortunately, it's a bit mine. He gave this help to the traditionalists, for whom Wojtyla was the Antichrist. He prepared it himself. Bergoglio, Bergoglio. The fruit of Wojtyla, according to Dziwisz's words, is like this. Good thing we are here. We defend the memory of our dear beloved John Paul II, because it can happen that someone who has been by your side for a lifetime never really knew you. Look, that's how it is. And Dziwisz clearly did not know John Paul II. He didn't know who he was. If he said to make Bergoglio a saint straight away like my John Paul, yours is yours, but he is not ours. And as you know, Wojtyla chose Totus Tuus as the motto of his pontificate. I would like to know from Dziwisz what sort of comparison he finds between the Marian devotion of Totus Tuus of John Paul II and the Pachamama of Bergoglio, and the woman next door, and the postwoman, and the woman here, and the woman there. I don't know, everyone has gone mad apparently, dear children. We are witnessing a bout of madness. I would like to know from Kenea Dziwisz what comparison he finds between Wojtyla's love for the Madonna and the contempt for the nonsense of Bergoglio, or what love for Jesus and the Eucharist he finds. Dziwisz tra. Wojtyla always kneeling before the Lord, and Bergoglio, who has made the Eucharistic theme, like the Trinitarian one, almost disappear. Thank you. But Pope Francis is also a saint, like his John Paul. In my opinion, this is one of the heaviest statements to come from Freemasonry, because the aim is to make people believe that there needs to be continuity with Bergoglio now, in the same way that Bergoglio had it with Wojtyla. Do you understand? So, what exactly is this game all about? Anyway, let's get back to the heart of the matter. Montfort inspired John Paul II. We cannot think of Wojtyla without Montfort. Montfort gave birth to Mary's Pope, the Pope of Totus Tuus, because he was not very sure about becoming a priest. He had a girl who was courting him. So then, while reading, do you remember that he tells this story at Salve? While he was striking the stone, breaking the stone, in the intervals he would read the treatise on true devotion to Mary, which I recommend you always keep in mind. It is an evergreen book, and he converted. He decided to become a priest. From that moment on, devotion to Mary became an essential part of Carlo Celestino's life until his death, Totus Tuus. But we could also mention Saint Maximilian Maria Kolbe and the whole galaxy of Marian initiatives in the pre-Bergoglian period, which in some way through, I don't know, either Kolbe or Wojtyła or other saints, Mariani, but the origin is the same for everyone, without a doubt Monforte. Some scholars say, among them Father De Fiores, that if it had not been for Saint Louis Marie Grignon de Montfort, the Marian fervor risked in that period, we are in the 18th century, running out, fading away. Montfort made this contribution, today we invoke him. Because from heaven, the saint of the Totus Tuus was the first, it was he, the saint of the Adveniat Regnum Christi, through Mary. The saint of the Deo Solemn, he used to sign himself like that in his letters. God was a radical saint. He was a giant spirit. He was a madman. Just think, he founded the Sisters of Poitiers and then left them with a cross that we have reproduced, where he wished them suffering, pain, hardship, sorrow, trials, illnesses. For the love of Jesus, that is why it was called the Cross of Poitiers. All right, today is also St. Paul of the Cross. At the same time, and above all, it is the memorial of St. Paul of the Cross. But this afternoon, for example, I will celebrate the Mass of St. Louis Marie, because there is actually the proper form. And then, of course, I will add St. Paul. St. Paul of the Cross. These are the last days of April. Today is Monday. This evening at 9 o'clock, do not miss the episode with Father Ramon entitled Il Punto at 9 o'clock on the YouTube channel of Radio Domina Nostra, the 10th episode. I expect that he too will speak about what is happening these days. And then I remind you of all my scheduled appointments on Radio Domina in the morning with the program Santa e Caffè. Then, on Tuesday evenings, Giovaneo, on Thursday with the Apocalypse, on Saturday with the Maltorta. In this phase here, until the so-called election has taken place, we dedicate it to the turmoil we are experiencing. So I invite you, if you have not already done so, to watch last night's episode of The Father Responds. It is available in the playlist. You will find it because it helps you to reflect. And it helps you to reflect on what we are, in fact, experiencing at this moment. You can find it. It's there in the playlist. There are some reflections alongside some phone calls, which might be helpful. Right, let's move on then to today's episode, which is also very interesting. I have to make an extremely concise summary. It isn't easy for me, but I think I manage it every time. Because, of course, by buying the daily newspapers, reading on social networks, a couple of things are coming to light. The title of today's segment is Conclave 2025, The Clash is Open. Conclave 2025, The Clash is Open. So let's recap. We did this yesterday evening. That's why I invite you to watch the episode of Il Padre Risponde if you haven't already, because it will make clearer what I want to discuss now. Namely, there are two slogans currently circulating. That is, a quick conclave. That is, we have to act quickly, and there's no turning back. Look, if you read the newspapers, especially those left-wing ones like Repubblica, it's a constant stream of praise. Praise, for example, for Zuppi. Cardinal Zuppi is in pole position, Parolin is as well, and the left-wing cardinals, it does not matter what they do or say, while at the same time the same newspapers do nothing but thank you. To mock, to make a fool of cardinals like Muller, like Burke, like Sarah. No, Sarah is contemptuously called the Guinean, just as at the beginning. Do you remember my mission? He was called that in the newspapers, he says. The Palermitan region, the priest, even today it happens, the Palermitan priest, where in summer, be careful. The Guinean cardinal isn't just Guinean, he's African as well. You already have to be careful, you know? It does not matter if someone like Tagle, the cardinal who sings Imagine, John Lennon, an atheist song, who sings off-key, like a good Asian Filipino, sings and performs. It's not the only occasion to sing inside the church. Imagine, and yet that one doesn't do it. On the contrary, well, this becomes an opportunity to promote him. So you see that there is a clash taking place. The cardinal electors, as you know, are 135, which is a ceiling never before reached by the will of Bergoglio. And of these 135, only about 20 are not Bergoglian appointees. However, it should be added that of these 20 to 25 cardinals who are not Bergoglian appointees, pay close attention, who will enter the conclave. It is not necessarily the case that they are anti-Bergoglio. You see what I mean? Let me make that clear. better. The Bergoglian cardinals are the overwhelming majority, about 115 appointed by Bergoglio. What remains is made up of those appointed by Ratzinger and some even by Wojtyla. However, that does not necessarily mean anything, and in fact Dziwisz's statement, in my opinion, remains among the most surprising of this pre-conclave phase. It proves it. It is not certain that just because they were not created by Bergoglio, they would want a pope who is not a Bergoglian. It is by no means certain. So we are witnessing an overwhelming majority in favor of not going back. And these are becoming increasingly clear in the interviews on the sidelines of the conclave. So this is the news I wanted to give you. More or less all the newspapers believe that the conclave should be held between the 5th and the 10th of May. We are also waiting for confirmation. Today it should be the Cardinal Deacon who announces the date of the conclave, if I remember correctly. It should be Cardinal Ray himself, if I remember correctly. But yesterday, do you remember, yesterday evening, in the program, The Father Responds, we were quoting the article, "The letter made public by Professor Joseph, at this moment his surname escapes me, who is a German, who was well known in the past, a friend of Ratzinger, who became known for having written a letter yesterday to Cardinal Ray. An open letter made public, Seifert, there we go. I remembered, it's not normal. Eating salmon is good for you. Seifert to Cardinal Giovanni Battista Ray. To ask you that before the conclave begins, the issues relating to Bergoglio's doctrinal errors be clarified. And in particular, if you remember last night, we were talking about the reference to the Abu Dhabi document, because it is blatantly the most problematic. The most problematic. This is the situation among the cardinals. They are there, let's say, very important days of dialogue in themselves. They should be very important if it were not for the Freemasonry that has already decided everything to push forward the false church, if it were not all a setup, as I believe. And these would in themselves be even more important days than the conclave itself, because these are the days when, not by chance, the Dean Cardinal, he postpones and delays the start date of the conclave as much as possible. Why? Why do this? I think you will get there. Because this way, at Cardinal Caio's house they can gather, at Cardinal Tisio's house they can gather. And this is right, because the cardinals do not know each other. They come from everywhere. Once they were all Italians and a few foreigners. Now most are foreigners, few Italians. And so these days here, starting from today, especially as it is already a working day, even though it is the 1st of May, Thursday, in between are days when the cardinals spend time together and meet, not all together, but in groups, you see. But that was when there was the Catholic Church. These days they are completely organized. I was struck by a long verbal exchange between the only cardinal, Zuppi and Emmanuel Macron. You see, I cannot play the video, the understanding between the two. Where do they know each other from? Did they meet there? How is it possible that they met there? And is there such a strong connection? Knife-thick humidity and heat. They do not know they are being filmed. And you can see Macron whispering in their ear, they hug, they kiss, because that is just how it is. I really do not think that Macron went looking for Cardinal Burke to whisper in his ear and to kiss and embrace him. That too. Politics now, because Macron wants to assert his own on behalf of Masonic Europe, in the same way as Trump put down the mortgage that you know about. So I'll give you a bit of an idea. So I think it's becoming a bit clear of the ongoing clash. The clash is out in the open now. The clash is out in the open because there is the ultra-Bergoglian progressive faction that says, conclave quickly and there's no going back. All right? But there is also, however, a small minority faction which, however, would enjoy the mortgage support of Donald Trump, who wants to make his voice heard. Now, I will take a moment to read you a couple of key items so that I can give you the overall picture. Let us begin with a contribution from the historian Lucetta Scarafia, who is about to speak. Thank you. Speaking of which, you should know I was saying this today in the car, Sister Alessandra. Something really curious. You should know that there is even a party that we have like this, a Bergoglian faction. And then Peter dissatisfied with Bergoglio, because he has not really implemented the reforms. I'm talking about someone like Vito Mancuso, who misses him, but in recent years lately he was saying that Bergoglio has not really implemented the reforms. Or Lucetta Scarafia, who, listen, the challenge is resolved, bioethics, interreligious dialogue, and women. Here, just to tell you that this gives you an idea, the extent of the clash that will take place inside. Unless everything is, as I, on the contrary, think, already predetermined. And what does that mean? Like when you go to a restaurant, I travel around Italy, just so you understand. Pictures help, my dear children. I travel around Italy, and we go to eat during the winter months especially. We often eat in our room, sometimes for reasons of time, because there isn't enough time. We stop at some inn, restaurant, and so on. Now, not them, but they know straight away, right away in my body. As soon as you walk in, you can smell whether the food and the ingredients are good. You notice it straight away. Straight away. You notice the cleanliness, the tablecloths, the welcome, affability, and so on. Whereas in other restaurants you ask, and it happens, I ask, for example, look, I saw on the menu that there is, I think it's like a Monday, there's Parmigiana. Just to say, look, if I have a stomach problem, I tell the head waiter, if it's from yesterday because it was Sunday, don't bring it to me. Don't worry. Father, it's not from yesterday. In fact, it's true. It's something worse. And the Parmigiana, made during the summer and all packed away in the freezers, little by little as it's not all eaten. So they bring you the Parmigiana. This happens in Emilia-Romagna, where it seems Parmigiana was born. They bring it to you, and I can tell when it's like that. They bring it to you, defrosted and reheated in the microwave at the 4-star restaurant, Michelin, for example. And they even do worse. But what does all this have to do with anything? They do even worse, because they bring it to you cold inside, because often, in a rush, it's only heated on the outside, so it's piping hot outside and cold inside. So have you understood now that it's all fake? That restaurant, instead, sometimes you go to that restaurant and they bring you, thank you. As happened to me the last time in Taormina, when I was going to the meeting in Catania, I said to Brother Celestino, but I want to go and have something to eat somewhere today, to mark the end of these 3 months on the road in a proper restaurant. I picked one right. Blimey. It's not clear why, when the dish is so good, they only bring you one. But for what reason? Does it bring bad luck? So the aubergine, the Parmigiana, pre-cooked. Montfort coined it. Lomé's saint rests in Saint-Laurent-sur-Sèvre. And yet that dish, which might well be a Parmigiana, made in the morning with fresh ingredients, they bring you just a little, but as soon as you put it in your mouth, what would I like to tell you? It's a matter of seeing what this conclave is. It is almost certainly a pre-packaged product, frozen, which will be reheated on those days. Now, do you get the picture in the microwave oven? Or we want to hope, but hope is the last to die, that they bring you the Parmigiana, the real one, as they say in Rome. The Parmigiana, the real one, that is made in the morning. If you want me to tell you what I think, from the smell I get the restaurant in Rome, it seems to me that the stuff they'll serve with the election of the new pope is Parmigiana, the pre-packaged kind, frozen and reheated in the microwave oven. Is that clear now? The historian Scarafia says the new pope will be moderate, with Bergoglio, confusion, and media appearance. Women, chosen, nuns, obedient. So one does not expect one of them to speak like this because the Italian historian and journalist Lucetta Scarafia outlines the main challenges facing the next pontiff, for the election of whom the conclave will gather between the 5th and the 10th of May, an assembly made up of, and so it is now official, from the 5th of May of 135, so it could happen. The new pope on the 8th of May. For example, because 3 days make one believe that on the 8th of May, at the Macron of Pompeii, there could be the new pope. The conclave will have to face the challenge of reassessing priorities and what cannot be postponed. Scarafia is a regular and incisive contributor to leading national newspapers, as well as the author of several books, among which, just to mention the most recent, we have The Woman Cardinal and Agnus Dei, Sexual Abuse by the Clergy in Italy, and others. Question Scarafia, what is your opinion on the pontificate of Pope Francis? Answer, I found it a confused papacy, all unbalanced towards media appearances, that is, appearing at a media level. What, in your opinion, have been Bergoglio's main innovations in theological, social, and theological matters? Answer, almost none. Many innovative statements, but they have not been followed up with anything concrete in the life of the Church. There you go, you see. What is the problem for many in the hyper-Bergoglian faction? He let us down, because in the end he did not do what he promised. There are also those who are dissatisfied, as is becoming apparent these days. Question, with regard to the papal election, the Church appears to be divided between progressives and conservatives. But if you read Repubblica and Corriere della Sera, for example, the numbers are striking. They are increasing day by day. On Saturday, there were 200,000. On Sunday, yesterday, 400,000. Today, some people are talking about 500,000. You can see how they rise, and maybe they put them in the microwave like a croissant, and we want to talk. Cross, cross, that's how it is in the morning, and that's just how it is. You put it in baristas, chapters, bars. In fact, I could never eat a croissant because it would be like an atomic bomb in my stomach, because it has not risen naturally. You see, they put it there, you open it, and then it puffs up with the heat of the oven. And it's the same thing. And which of the two groups might prevail? I mean, will there be a progressive pope? Will it be Parolin? Or a traditionalist conservative pope? Like, in fact, what do I know, Burke? The response from the Scarafia, which must be taken into consideration, is important. I think he might accept us, because he replies, I think a moderate will prevail in this sense. Do you know who is gaining ground in an extraordinary way? Cardinal Peter Battista Pizzaballa, who is the Latin Patriarch, Cardinal of Jerusalem, pro-Palestinian though. So this could cause some problems. And above all, he is a Bergoglian. They say he is moderate, that is, he wants reforms. I listened to one of his latest interviews. Unreliable because when asked about the Synod, the latter, who was talking about openness to women at the altar and the abolition of celibacy, he does not answer. But the Church has so many colors, so many expressions. It also means the Church has many colors. This is relativism. And if anything, Pizzaballa's moderate stance lies in the form, not in the substance. I don't know if that's clear. Question. Are you afraid there might be a step backwards compared to Pope Francis's openness? On issues such as the blessing of gay couples and the role of women in the Church? You see, the newspapers really are, look, Benedict XVI was right when he spoke of a real council and a virtual council. The work of the newspapers. And here it is all the same. The Church is in deep crisis. The churches are empty. The priests are depressed. Baptisms are decreasing. Marriages are almost no longer celebrated. People are not engaged by faith. The masses are looking for something else, and here they are arguing about women at the altar and gay couples. But do you think that's normal? I really don't know. It's like the Titanic sinking, and they're asking the passengers about the menu. What menu do you want? As the ship sinks. Answer. The blessing of gay couples has in fact been denied by Francis himself. That is, he is disappointed. That's Brother Celestino's laugh as he delights in saints and coffee daily. The role of women in the church has not changed. The few women appointed to positions of power in an institution that is entirely male and clerical cannot do anything. She is disappointed. Francis has disappointed her. They are only there for show, chosen from among very obedient nuns. Let us hope that the next pope changes this situation. But why not vote openly? A woman pope, a female pope? Sorry, women among themselves. I have learned this. They know each other, and so, like us men, no. That is, the male gender is not like the female one. There is an immediate understanding among women. So then let's elect a female pope. Why not? So she speaks on behalf of all those people, and there are not a few, who are dissatisfied with Pope Francis, who had made promises but did not keep them. The question is always the same. You're not hot or cold. What do you think are, in your opinion, the issues, get ready, that the new pontiff will have to face? One expects the proclamation of the gospel. One expects people who do not understand each other. Holy peace, a bit of theology. But there is no competence in any of these reasons, and I won't say which, because it's these. Then a big national newspaper writes the ordainment of priests. Ordainment? We say ordination. Ignorant people. These, they write without even knowing how they write. They know nothing about theology. So the question is, what could the priorities be? I expect that the Scarafia will reply as a person, if competent in the theology of sensation. A crisis, a new evangelical impetus, for example. This I think we would all agree on, unless there is someone who is stupid. For those of us who are thinkers like myself, it is clear that there is a priority to keep in mind. That is a new impetus towards the gospel. In my view, this should be the priority of the new pope. And to this I would add the alpha point, von Balthasar's idea, that is, to start again from Jesus Christ, to reaffirm. If I were elected pope, the first document that I would write would be an in-depth treatise on Christology, dogmatic, that is, to go back to proclaiming Jesus Christ. I would call it, I don't know, Christ Rex. I'd give it a striking title. Pope Alessandro Minutella has published his first encyclical. It is called Christ Rex Omnium Populorum. That is something powerful, which proclaims once again that only Jesus Christ saves, without for this reason giving up respect for other religions or dialogue in the global village, but only Jesus Christ. For us Christians, he is the Savior, to be announced to everyone, among other things. I think that should be the priority. Let's see what it is for Scarafia. I didn't expect this here. She says that the problem to solve is the dialogue with Muslims and with Jews. You know, I hope I'm not shocking you. For me, it's not a priority. But in any case, it's certainly a topic that needs to be revisited, because Bergoglio hasn't done much about this. So, another question is the last question. In Rome, the great leaders of the world have arrived, among them Trump. You see, everyone is struck by Trump's arrival. By the way, he actually said to Macron, they studied his lips. He really told him, move aside. Move aside, this is our business. He writes history like that. You never see him sitting with his legs crossed. Trump is someone who sits with his legs open, like a sheriff. He sits like this, for now like this. You're sitting like Trump. All you need to do is put your hands like this, and you are Trump. You see? Even a person's posture, it says everything, because we are soul and body. Thought, if it is strong, involves a person's body. When you want to know if someone has a strong mind, they have certain distinctive postures, like Trump. And Trump came to Rome, presumably out of sheer generosity and goodwill. I really don't want to sound conspiratorial. He certainly came to attend and honor the funeral of Pope Francis, but he was also keen to send a clear and unmistakable message. To the cardinals, be careful. I am at the White House. And the story, for those who know the history of the modern and contemporary church, well, they know that the conclaves of the 20th century, especially from the second half of the 20th century onwards, were particularly marked by the cross-cutting interest of the White House. It is even said that with the famous Metz Pact, in which it was said that the church would renounce a public condemnation of Soviet communism, the Americans would have insisted that a pope should not be elected over another. Anyway, Trump asks him, what vote does the pontiff leave? Scaraffia's answer, it flips over. Much ado about nothing. This is the position. Some discontented people, but not discontented like us, because we are Catholics, discontented like them, who are hyper-progressive, who wanted the church as Martini dreamed of it. In reality, Bergoglio did not deliver on that. Someone like Scarafia delivers a scathing verdict on how the Bergoglian leadership has fared. Much ado about nothing. This is the interview with Scarafia. But let's move on. Today in Repubblica, of course, there's all the celebration of Bergoglio, the funerals, the tomb, the coffin. It's a pity they forget and don't mention that the square was filled by the young people of the Jubilee, which had already been planned. Among other things, many had also come for the missed canonization of Carlo Acutis, so a great many people were in Rome. Look interesting. I told you about the rebels, about Bergoglio's death, but between yesterday and the day before yesterday, the weekend that saw Bergoglio's funeral in Rome, there were thousands of people who had come for the canonization of Carlo Acutis, which was then postponed, and for the Jubilee of the Young. Parolin yesterday at the Youth Jubilee, he truly gave his very best, because as he said, I quote Parolin's words, "We are alone, lost, and defenseless. And sorry, but isn't there Jesus Christ? But isn't the church Christ's?" But what sort of statements are these? And there is a kind of messianic confession from Bergoglio. Careful, here we have ecclesiastical Freemasonry. Here is what I have told you, the false church. The tone is messianic. They're like the Emmaus disciples. We are alone, lost, and defenseless. But excuse me, isn't the church guided by Jesus Christ? As they say in Rome, when a pope dies, another is made, which then became a national saying, meaning there's always a solution. When a pope dies, another is made. No, we are alone, defenseless, and lost. Alone, defenseless, and lost, threatened, said the corporate Veneto. An image that can well represent the state of mind of all of us, of the church, and of the whole world. The Messiah has died because Bergoglio was the Messiah. These people, including Parolin, no longer spoke about Jesus Christ. They just endlessly quoted Pope Francis. Listen to Zuppi. Pay attention and you will see. It is not Christ's gospel that matters, but the Pope's, so it is dead. 3 days have passed, and still he has not risen, so we were hoping it would be him. And that's how it is. We keep reading Parolin's words from yesterday, which go hand in hand with those of the king. So what are we saying? Unless someone says, no, Father, let it go. It's exactly the opposite. They're slippery, they told me. Several people, slippery. It's possible they don't believe it. But as you said, to self-regulate and make it look like the church is moving forward, they're spending these days celebrating without believing in it, including Parolin. Let's suppose Pope Francis, so that the whole establishment, the endorsement, they are pleased with this. But in reality, they are already looking to the post-Bergoglio era. I do not know what to say to you, because this too is possible, but it would also be much worse. All alone, because the lie would be replaced by something worse than hypocrisy. Parolin said yesterday, he may represent the state of mind of all of us, the shepherd whom the Lord has given to his people, Pope Francis. The shepherd whom the Lord has given to his people has ended his earthly life and has left us. The pain for his passing, the sense of sadness that overwhelms us, the turmoil we feel in our hearts. But do you think this is normal? But had no one ever spoken like this at the death of a pope? I mean, the pope dies. There have been 265, come on. The valid ones. Then another one arrives. Yes. Tell the little ones that the cardinals have come to Rome to elect the pope. Please tell them. But what kind of homily is this? The feeling of being lost, we are experiencing all this, just like the apostles did at the death of Jesus. There you go. The gospel tells us that it is precisely in these moments of darkness that the Lord comes to meet us. To you, to all of us, to the whole world, Pope Francis sends his embrace from heaven. Hold on to it. I also think, in my view, I do not know what kind of expectation it is. Here, and then always insist that the key to interpreting the pontificate of the unforgettable Pope Francis, the irreplaceable Pope Francis, is mercy. Here this is Cardinal Parolin, and in the meantime there is Zuppi, the shapeshifter you should see. Unfortunately it will not be so, but hope that Burke were elected and you would see Zuppi transform. He would suddenly become what I know. He returned to Bologna because he had to celebrate Mass in a small parish. Here's how they introduce him. Just look at La Repubblica. The youngsters are calling out to him loudly, Zuppi, Zuppi, shall we take a photo? Don Matteo is certain of it. This is the church. The photos? The church is the photos. This is the church. After the Pope's funeral and after the meeting with Zelensky, whom I thanked, he also published a video. On Saturday, the Cardinal returned to Bologna. As soon as he arrived, he went to the parish, the faithful there to applaud him, hugs, statements. But currently, on the other hand, in the meantime, the demonization of Burke, of Sarah, the Guinean Sarah, the German Müller, Ratzinger's heir. Do you remember what La Repubblica wrote about Ratzinger? Well, I'll spare you all the rest. Before wrapping up with Repubblica, since we are nearing the end, all that extravagant praise for the constant stream of people making their way to Pope Francis's tomb, we simply could not conclude our reading of Repubblica without an authoritative voice representing Pergo's thought. There are some mummies emerging, among them Cardinal Castor Casper, who is being interviewed today by Repubblica. Castor Casper is 85 years old. I am reading, he uses the expression to vote with your feet, which in Germany and in the English-speaking world is used to refer to those who express their opinion through their movements. I remind you that Casper was the first cardinal. Praised by Bergoglio in the first Angelus, well done this cardinal. Mercy, which however becomes mercyism, meaning that God gives you love and mercy, but you can remain in sin. Life, as it comes, that is, a transversal theological axis between liberation theology, you must read F. Balthasar. In fact, Casper has always been particularly disoriented by von Balthasar's theological positions. Let's read. Question, Eminence, what is the main legacy of Pope Francis? Answer, the closeness of the Church to all human beings, especially to the poor and the marginalized. The Pope then emphasized that the gospel is the center of our faith. It's a pity he made another one. And we must be disciples of Jesus Christ, and therefore Pachamama. The Vatican is the gospel, in order to be disciples of Jesus Christ. There is the Pachamama. How do they reconcile? And then for him, peace and justice in the world were very important, because without justice and without peace we cannot survive. And then there is the Synod. Here is the question. What did the Synod mean for the Pope? The answer is that the Synod is his legacy. 2028, let me remind you. The Church, that is us, all the baptized, and we must walk together. This is synodality. We must be there for one another and with one another, and the Pope himself and the bishops must walk together with the faithful. Question. In your opinion, can one go back from this momentum? From Francis? Answer. One cannot go back. There is no going back. It would be senseless. But perhaps a bit of worry. They have it too. Come on. It's possible. The long shadow of Trump hangs over them, over all of them. Then there was St. Maximilian Kolbe, the Immaculate's madman, champion and prophet of Mary. They fear that Trump might upset the balance of power because this conclave is unfolding while Trump remains in the White House. If the Democratic vice president had emerged victorious, at this moment the name that comes to mind, Kamala Harris, none of this existed. If there had been a conclave, as there will be, but at the White House there was Kamala Harris, things were not like that. So it must be said that, in any case, a certain concern is spreading among Bergoglio's supporters, because we need to see how much it will matter that at the White House there is a Trump whose administration has cut funding to the LGBT world, who strongly reiterates family policies in defense of the traditional family, staunch defenders of life, in the face of the demands of the pro-abortion world. Clearly, all of this truly carries considerable weight. So Casper, does not hide it. 92 years old, they got it wrong. Here then, they say 85, it is Republica. You see the inaccuracies. It says 85 years old. Are we sure 92 years old? In fact, that seemed right to me, so you cannot go back. Question, what qualities should the new pope have? Answer, I do not know. You have to call God to ask him. Question. But for example, Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, in his homily, said that Francesco touched minds and hearts. Answer, this is true. He gave an excellent homily. In fact, do you remember that we were about to, and it was clear that the people of God voted with their feet when they came here in such great numbers for the funeral. Thus, we'll follow in Pope Francis's footsteps. Question, Cardinal Parolin recalled yesterday. So you see, it's a panda. Cardinal Re and Cardinal Parolin yesterday, Saturday Re, yesterday Parolin. Cardinal Parolin recalled mercy as Francis's legacy. I reply, he is Lombard king, isn't he? From Lombardy. This is his central message, Casper replies. Jesus Christ preached mercy, lived mercy, died for mercy. That is why mercy is so central in the faith of the Church. I remind you that Bergoglio praised him as the first cardinal in the first Angelus, this excellent cardinal. Mercy. We are coming to a close. In your opinion, when will the conclave begin? Answer, the 5th or 6th of May. But this is now absolutely certain that the opening of the conclave should be on the 5th of May, or break time, a Monday. In your opinion, will Cardinal Becciu enter or not? Answer, I cannot judge on this. Others who are competent will decide. Republica concludes with the approval ratings towards Pope Francis. The survey, Francis had the approval of 58% of Italians, surpassed only by President Mattarella. That is, Bergoglio is surpassed in terms of approval rating only by Mattarella. To conclude, and that's all for today, so now things are a bit clearer for you. On Libero today, there is an interesting piece on the subject by Cardinal Ruini, also in his 90s, in a wheelchair. You know I wanted it in Rome, and I hope it stays. Cardinal Camillo Ruini. He has set 4 conditions for the cardinals entering the conclave. I read Cardinal Camillo Ruini, 94 years old, so everyone is getting involved, as you can see. This hasn't happened like this for a very long time. It's a conclave on which the whole world is focusing. For the fate of Christianity, everyone knows it is decisive. There's no doubt about it. I don't think we should discuss electing a moderate. In my opinion, they fail. For obvious reasons, it is far too polarized. The thing is, a moderate would end up pleasing no one and would remain in a rather isolated position. And then a Bergogliano by essence, by antonomasia, by definition, is not a moderate. So even someone like Pizzaballa, whom they call a moderate because of his manners, I have just told you, A moderate in form, but in substance, in doctrine, in approach, in vision, in Weltanschauung, as the Germans say. There is no such thing as a moderate. Do you find a moderate cardinal? I do not think there is one. So everyone gets involved, even Cardinal Camillo Ruini. This is actually rather moving a bit, also, because I've always liked Ruini. I hope I'm not disappointing anyone because of his ability. They used to call him Dr. Subtle. Of medial. Anyway, Sia sets 4 conditions. I read Camillo Ruini offers a special prayer of his own, and together with it, some strong guidance to the cardinals, who on the 5th of May will enter the conclave to elect the new pope. This message is presented by the blog of the Vatican expert Sandro Magister. Diakonos Ruini was the cardinal closest to John Paul II, of whom he was vicar for the Diocese of Rome, as well as president of the Italian Episcopal Conference. He was among the great electors and admirers of Benedict XVI, of whom he once again recalls the value, but also a limitation, the poor aptitude for governing, says Ruini. Today is St. Louis Marie Grignon de Montfort's feast, Mary's madman, into which the future pope would do well not to fall again. What should the church be like then in the pontiff? Francis, Ruini's answer. First of all, a good and charitable church. But it must also have another great priority alongside charity, caring for the poor. You see the mediation? These are... So certainly Pope Francis, he did well with this focus on immigrants, on the poor, and so on. But the other great priority that was missing is the flame of faith, threatened from so many sides. It's a pity that Ruini misses this, that for Magnaciana the first was Bergoglio, in order not to let the faith disappear. The next step requires a lot of prayer. Then there is the central issue of governance. The pontificate of Benedict XVI was undermined by his poor aptitude for governing, and this is a concern that applies to every era, including the near future. Moreover, one must not forget that what is at stake is the governance of that most unique reality, which is the Church. Fundamental, finally, is the awareness of the unity of the faithful. And this seems reasonable to me, but Bergoglio did not take it into account at all, because he was not the Pope. He practically dealt with those who did not conform. This is something that has never been seen before. He was happy to throw people out. I was the first to suffer his attacks. 2 excommunications in the same act. It had never happened before. It is a historical unicum of which there is no trace. Because I am not supposed to exist, I am the invisible man. But they should tell the story. 2 excommunications in the same canonical act. It had never happened in 2,000 years of awakening. The anger of saying, get rid of this one. Who dares to speak the truth? And so Ruini says, there must be unity among believers, even when they think differently, because the Church is a great family. To overcome divisions, there must be a renewed presentation of the one faith, and this is reasonable, because then we may see things differently in certain matters. But faith is faith, and faith is founded upon biblical revelation. Let me remind you, upon revelation which consists of tradition, scripture, and tradition. All right, that will do. There was one last thing I wanted to read to you from today's issue of the newspaper La Verità. The newspapers that catch my attention are all from today, which also highlights Ruini's intervention. But there is a long article by Silvana De Mari entitled, I Support a Pontiff Who Protects Christians. Here is something, here you are. The sly saying that every time a pope dies, another is made, as you say, contains a profound truth. The Church endures throughout history, despite the errors and contradictions of its shepherds. Today, what is needed is a guide who sees the truly least among us in the persecuted Catholics in every part of the world. And in fact, it is a scandal that of persecuted Christians in Africa, in Nigeria, massacred in Syria, in Southeast Asia, in some areas of the Philippines as well. Nobody's mentioned them in years. When a pope dies, that's how it is. So 5 days of mourning is something incredible, writes De Mari. Especially in a de-Christianized country like Italy, they even suspended the matches. Where fewer and fewer people go to Mass, especially in a de-Christianized place like the West, where in some countries children are told off for making the sign of the cross in school canteens. Why all this display of mourning, the altered schedules, the canceled matches? Because Bergoglio was the chaplain of the New World Order, says De Maria. I'm quoting from Rivita. These are not my words. Well, they are also mine, but in this case they are De Maria's. Whose mascot is Greta Thunberg, a chaplain who has followed the order to strip Christ and his church of their sacredness, replacing, if I may quote Giorgio Agamben, eternal salvation with earthly salvation. And I would add a salvation of earthly life entrusted to champions of brotherly love such as Che Guevara and Fauci. I repeat some statements that could hardly come to the mind of a believer. God is not Catholic. 1st of October 2013. I do not want to convert anyone. Proselytism is a great foolishness. 1st of October 2013, Christ died on the cross for everyone. And those who believe in him have the command to convert. This is De Mari commenting. Then further statements from Bergoglio, Emma Bonino, and Giorgio Napolitano are among the great figures of today's Italy. It's Monday the 28th, very humid. There are others that I will skip. Bergoglio's is called schizophrenogenic communication. We speak of schizophrenogenic communication when two statements are made that contradict each other, when with my mouth I utter syllables like abortion is wrong, but with my behavior I actually affirm that abortion is acceptable. In this case, thanks to your deep friendship with Emma Bonino, you carry forward our ideas. And Jesus acts a bit dumb, and Jesus acts a bit dumb. 15th of June 2016. When I gave communion to a lady, she took my hand and said, "Thank you, Father, thank you, I am Jewish." I said, "No, what I gave you is also Jewish, go on." 24th of October 2022. This is sacrilege, and if it is done without awareness, as I hope Bergoglio did, it is. Public repentance is required by the canon code, because it is a sacrilege to give communion to a non-Christian. Instead, he and I, even Jesus was Jewish, we talked about it, do you remember? Again, even within the Holy Trinity. They are all arguing behind closed doors, while outside the image is one of unity. This is blasphemy. That was the devil speaking. The counter-proposal, it is not true that they love each other. They argue among themselves. You know I wanted it in Rome. I hope it stays. But how is it possible that Christ's kingdom via Mary's, yes? And how is it possible that on Saturday Cardinal Rea spoke like that in the face of these statements? It is not the politician Berlusconi who sometimes, for example, let me give you an example. Berlusconi often said he was speaking off the cuff. He was out of line. He liked women. Do you remember how many jokes? Not quite so bad, though, when it came to women. Right? But he was a politician. It's a different thing from someone who is the Pope and makes such a statement about the Trinity. Still, the death of Jesus is a historical fact, but his resurrection is not. It is only an act of faith. 4th of April, 2017. Mary was a woman of the streets. 24th of December 2021, Maria mingled with humanity. Maria, the mestizo mother, has mingled God. This statement is a blasphemy. 12th of December 2019, homosexual people have the right to be a family. What we need to create is a law on civil unions. 21st of October 2020. This is no longer the time for God's judgment, but the time for the judgment of men. Then I read the article. If I were to be blocked, it would really be sensational. I'm reading an article, so it's a matter of completeness. I will keep reading. The vaccine is a light of hope. 25th December 2020. All religions are a path to reach God. They are, let's make a comparison, like different languages. This is by far the most, as the professor said, Mamma mia, cipher. And that one, if you really do not want to deal with anything else, this should be listened to. Cipher says cardinal, king. If you really do not want to listen to anything else, which even today we are, briefly with De Maria highlighting, you do not want to listen. But the question about all religions being the same. It is not possible to enter the conclave without stating clearly that this is heresy. Because if they enter the conclave with these statements, and no one speaks because the Unacumbe do not believe in the legal issue that we, on the other hand, keep alive. That is, the conclave is invalid in itself for the simple fact that Bergoglio was an anti-pope, and the last reigning pope was Benedict XVI.